Ethan Cole believed love was built in quiet moments rather than grand gestures, and for a long time Lena Hart agreed with him. Their apartment carried the soft rhythm of shared routines. Morning coffee made without asking, silent smiles exchanged across the kitchen, and evenings spent talking about futures that felt certain. Ethan worked hard and loved deeply, but he rarely said the feelings aloud, assuming his actions spoke clearly enough. Lena, however, felt emotion like a pulse that needed words, reassurance, and presence. At first, the differences between them felt balanced, almost beautiful. Ethan grounded Lena when her thoughts ran too fast, and Lena reminded Ethan that life held more than responsibilities. They laughed often, touching hands as they passed each other, feeling safe in a connection that seemed stronger than time. Friends admired them, calling them steady, the kind of couple that looked unshakable from the outside. But stability is not the same as closeness, and slowly, almost invisibly, the space between them widened. Ethan's workload grew heavier, his phone buzzing late into the night, his focus split between deadlines and expectations he never fully explained. He promised it was temporary, that things would calm down soon. Yet every promise felt postponed by another task. Lena watched him fall asleep exhausted beside her, wondering when conversations had turned into short updates instead of shared feelings. She told herself she was being unfair. Ethan wasn't cruel or careless. He was simply tired. Still, loneliness doesn't measure intentions, only absence. Lena began filling the silence with small distractions, long walks, music playing too loudly in empty rooms, scrolling through messages that never quite said what she needed to hear. She missed being noticed in the simple way she once had been. One evening, Claire Benson visited for dinner, bringing laughter that briefly softened the tension. Claire had known Ethan since college and had an easy honesty that sometimes made Lena uncomfortable because it revealed things she tried to hide. As they cleared the table, Claire watched Ethan answer yet another work call and leaned toward Lena with a quiet expression. "You okay?" she asked softly. Lena smiled quickly. "Yeah, just tired." Claire nodded, but didn't look convinced. "He's been under pressure. Just don't disappear in the process." The comment lingered long after Claire left. Lena wondered if she already was disappearing, fading quietly inside a relationship that still looked perfect to everyone else. Days blended into each other. Ethan left early and returned late, apologizing with gentle kisses and promises of a weekend getaway they never quite planned. Lena listened, wanting to believe him, yet feeling something fragile inside her starting to crack. She didn't need gifts or dramatic change. She wanted attention, the kind that said she still mattered at the center of his world. The turning point arrived at a small gathering Ethan insisted they attend for networking. The room buzzed with unfamiliar voices, polished smiles, and conversations about careers Lena barely followed. Ethan moved quickly from person to person, his charm professional and practiced, leaving Lena alone near the drinks table. She felt invisible among strangers, watching him laugh in a way she hadn't seen at home in months. That was when Ryan Mercer appeared beside her, offering an easy smile that felt unforced. "Looks like you're counting the minutes too," he said, gesturing toward the crowd. Lena laughed softly, surprised at how relieved she felt just to be noticed. "Is it that obvious?" "Only to someone doing the same thing," he replied. Their conversation flowed effortlessly, moving from harmless jokes to thoughtful questions that made Lena feel seen in a way she hadn't expected. Ryan listened carefully, holding eye contact long enough to suggest genuine interest without crossing any line. For the first time in weeks, she found herself speaking freely, words spilling out before she could overthink them. Across the room, Ethan caught her eye briefly and smiled, relieved to see her engaged. He didn't notice how long the conversation lasted or how easily Lena laughed. To him, it was simply proof she was having a good time as the evening ended. Ryan said goodbye with a warmth that lingered after he walked away. "Nice meeting you, Lena. Hope we talk again." The words were simple, harmless even, but they echoed in her mind on the drive home. Ethan talked about work opportunities he might gain from the event, his energy returning as he recounted details she struggled to focus on. She watched the streetlights blur past the window, feeling restless in a way she couldn't explain. Later that night, while Ethan slept deeply beside her, Lena stared at the ceiling, replaying fragments of the evening. Nothing inappropriate had happened, yet something had shifted inside her, a reminder of how it felt to be listened to without distraction. She turned toward Ethan, studying the familiar shape of him in the dim light, and wondered when love had started to feel quiet in the wrong way. Outside, the city settled into silence, but Lena's thoughts refused to rest. She didn't realize yet that a single conversation had begun to pull at the threads of everything she believed was secure. And somewhere between comfort and curiosity, a new story had quietly begun. The days after the networking event passed with a strange quiet that Lena Hart couldn't quite explain. Nothing in her life had visibly changed, yet she felt as though something inside her had shifted position, like a picture frame slightly tilted on a familiar wall. Ethan Cole continued moving through his routines with determined focus, juggling meetings and calls with an intensity that left little room for anything else. He still kissed her goodbye in the mornings and still asked about her day at night, but the questions felt automatic, asked out of care, yet answered without depth. Lena tried to ignore the growing ache of distance. She reminded herself that Ethan was working for their future, building something secure for both of them. Still, security felt cold when it replaced connection. She found herself pausing before speaking, unsure whether her thoughts would be heard or simply acknowledged and set aside. Conversations became shorter, ending with gentle smiles that covered unspoken frustrations. One afternoon, while scrolling through her phone, she noticed a new message notification. Ryan Mercer's name appeared, simple and unexpected. "Hey, hope you survived that event." It was chaos. Lena hesitated before replying, telling herself it was harmless. They exchanged light messages about the people they had met and joked about the awkward conversations. Ryan's tone remained relaxed and respectful, but his attention felt steady in a way that surprised her. He remembered small details she had mentioned, things Ethan once noticed without trying. The chats became occasional check-ins, nothing secretive or dramatic, yet Lena began looking forward to them. She told herself it was just friendly conversation, a reminder that she still existed beyond schedules and responsibilities. At the same time, she noticed how rarely Ethan looked up from his laptop when she spoke, how quickly he returned to work even during dinner point one evening. Lena attempted to bridge the gap. She prepared Ethan's favorite meal and waited for the right moment to speak. When he arrived home, tired but smiling, she tried to describe how lonely she had been feeling. "I just miss us," she said quietly. Ethan paused, genuinely surprised. "We're okay, aren't we?" he asked. "I know I've been busy, but it's temporary." She nodded, though the answer felt incomplete. Temporary had become a repeating word, stretched so far it lost meaning. Ethan reached for her hand, apologizing softly, and she believed he meant it. Yet within minutes his phone rang again, pulling him back into a world she couldn't enter. That night Lena lay awake, sensing the gap growing wider despite their attempt to close it. She wasn't angry, only tired of waiting to feel important again. Meanwhile, Ryan's messages continued, never demanding but always present. He asked real questions, what she enjoyed, what made her laugh, what she wanted beyond routine. Lena found herself sharing thoughts she hadn't voiced in months. Ryan listened without rushing to fix anything, and that alone felt comforting. Still, guilt crept in. She hadn't crossed a line, but she knew she was leaning emotionally towards someone outside her relationship. She began deleting messages after reading them. Not because they were wrong, but because she didn't want to explain something she barely understood herself. Claire Benson noticed the change before anyone else. Meeting Lena for coffee, she studied her carefully. "You seem distracted," Claire said. Lena forced a smile. "Just thinking too much." Claire leaned forward. "You? And Ethan okay?" Lena hesitated, then nodded too quickly. Claire didn't push further, but her worried expression lingered. Back at home, Ethan tried to reconnect in small ways, suggesting a movie night or promising a weekend off. Lena appreciated the effort, yet felt a subtle hesitation inside herself, as if she had already stepped half a pace away without meaning to. She wondered why it felt easier to talk honestly with Ryan, someone she barely knew, than with the man she loved. One rainy evening, Ryan invited her to grab coffee, saying he was nearby and thought it would be nice to talk outside of screens. Lena stared at the message for a long time. She told herself it was innocent, just two people having conversation. Still, her heart raced as if she were making a decision bigger than she wanted to admit. She typed a careful response. "Maybe sometime." Even that small possibility made her uneasy. When Ethan came home later that night, he looked exhausted but hopeful. "I think things will slow down soon," he said, slipping his arm around her. "I know I haven't been present. I'm trying." Lena leaned into him, feeling both warmth and sadness at the same time. She wanted to believe that trying would be enough, That love alone could erase the quiet loneliness building between them. They sat together in silence. Her phone vibrated on the table. Ryan's name flashed briefly before the screen dimmed again. Ethan didn't notice, but Lena did. The moment felt like standing at the edge of something uncertain, aware that one step in either direction could change everything. She turned her phone face down and rested her head against Ethan's shoulder, trying to hold on to what they still had. Yet even as she closed her eyes, her thoughts drifted toward the unanswered message and the unfamiliar feeling of being truly seen. For the first time, Lena realized that the danger wasn't a single decision. It was the slow, quiet movement of her heart towards somewhere new. Lena Hart told herself she still had control over everything, yet control felt thinner each day. The messages with Ryan Mercer had become part of her routine, small exchanges that brightened quiet moments without demanding anything in return. She answered carefully, choosing words that felt safe, but the ease between them grew anyway. Ryan listened without judgment, and Lena found herself sharing pieces of her thoughts that she no longer offered Ethan Cole. Ethan, meanwhile, sensed something changing even if he couldn't name it. He noticed the way Lena paused before responding, the way her smiles sometimes arrived a second too late. He blamed himself, assuming the distance was a natural result of his long hours. Determined to fix things, he planned small gestures, a surprise dinner, a free evening without work, but the timing always fell off. When he tried to reconnect, Lena seemed present but distracted, as if part of her attention lived somewhere else. One evening, Ethan suggested they revisit a restaurant they used to love. Lena agreed, hoping the familiar atmosphere might bring back their rhythm. The dinner started warmly, filled with shared memories and soft laughter. Ethan spoke about future plans, about slowing down once a major project ended. Lena listened carefully, wanting to feel reassured, yet something inside her hesitated. The promises sounded sincere, but they also sounded delayed, like a future that never quite arrived. As they drove home, Ethan reached for her hand. "I know I haven't been my best lately," he said quietly, "but I don't want to lose what we have." The honesty in his voice made Lena's chest tighten. She squeezed his hand back, feeling guilt brush against the growing confusion inside her. She wasn't trying to leave. She just didn't know how to return fully either. Later that night, her phone buzzed with a message from Ryan. "Hope your evening went well. You sounded tired earlier." The simple concern felt intimate in a way she hadn't expected. She hesitated before replying, then put the phone aside without answering. For the first time, she realized how divided she felt, caught between loyalty and longing, between comfort and curiosity. The following week brought more tension. Ethan's project reached a critical stage, pulling him deeper into work. He apologized repeatedly, promising that once things settled, everything would improve. Lena nodded, yet her frustration began turning inward. She stopped trying to explain how alone she felt because the conversation never seemed to fit into the moments they had left together. Ryan noticed her silence and didn't push. Instead, he sent a simple message. "If you ever need to talk, I'm here." Those words lingered longer than they should have. Eventually, Lena agreed to meet him for coffee, convincing herself it was harmless. The cafe was quiet, warm with soft music and low voices. Ryan greeted her with an easy smile that immediately eased her nervousness. They talked about ordinary things at first, work, movies, small frustrations, but the conversation gradually deepened. Ryan asked questions Ethan hadn't asked in months, not out of neglect but out of exhaustion. Lena felt herself relax, laughing more freely than she expected. When the conversation turned personal, Ryan listened carefully as she described feeling invisible in her own relationship. He didn't criticize Ethan or encourage her toward anything inappropriate. He simply acknowledged her feelings. "That sounds lonely," he said softly. The validation hit harder than she anticipated. Lena realized how much she had needed someone to understand without trying to fix her. As she left the cafe, a quiet guilt settled over her. Nothing physical had happened, yet she knew the emotional line was beginning to blur. She promised herself she would create distance, that she wouldn't let things go further. But emotions rarely obey promises. Home, Ethan noticed her lighter mood and smiled, relieved to see her happy again. "It's nice seeing you like this," he said, wrapping his arms around her from behind. Lena froze for a moment, struck by how simple his affection was and how complicated her feelings had become. She leaned into him, trying to silence the doubt in her mind. That night, Claire Benson called unexpectedly. After a few minutes of casual conversation, Claire's tone grew serious. I don't know what's going on, Claire said gently, but Ethan looks worried. If something's wrong, talk to him before it gets bigger. Lena promised she would, though she wasn't sure how to explain something she barely understood herself. She wasn't angry at Ethan, and she didn't want to hurt him. Yet part of her feared that honesty would force a decision she wasn't ready to make. Days passed, and the tension quietly thickened. Ethan tried harder, noticing the cracks, but misreading their cause. Lena, meanwhile, found herself checking her phone more often, waiting for messages she told herself didn't matter. One evening, as rain tapped against the windows, Ethan fell asleep early on the couch, exhausted from another long day. Lena watched him for a moment, feeling a surge of tenderness mixed with sadness. She remembered why she had fallen in love with him, his steadiness, his kindness, the life they had built together. Her phone vibrated again. Ryan's message appeared. You've been quiet. Everything okay? Lena stared at the screen, her reflection faintly visible in the dark glass. She knew she was standing at a crossroads, one shaped not by dramatic choices, but by small, quiet decisions made over time. After a long pause, she typed a reply, then stopped. Instead, she locked her phone and placed it face down, her heart unsettled. Outside, the rain grew heavier, and inside the apartment the silence felt full of questions neither she nor Ethan had yet spoken aloud. And as Lena sat there between loyalty and temptation, she realized the real conflict was no longer outside her. It was within her, waiting for a moment that would force the truth into the open. The tension that had been quietly building finally began to surface in ways Lena Hart could no longer ignore. The space between intention and action felt smaller now, narrowed by every unread message, every unfinished conversation, every moment she hesitated before speaking honestly. Ethan Cole moved through the apartment with tired determination, unaware that the silence between them carried more weight than either of them admitted. Lena watched him closely over the following days, noticing the small efforts he made to reconnect. He left his phone on the table during dinner, asked about her plans, and tried to make eye contact longer than usual, as if searching for reassurance he could not quite find. His care was genuine, and that made everything harder. She wanted to meet him halfway, yet her emotions felt divided, pulled in different directions by comfort, guilt, and uncertainty. Ryan Mercer, sensing her distance, sent fewer messages. The quiet should have made things easier, but instead it left Lena alone with her thoughts. Without distraction, she began questioning why she had allowed another connection to grow at all. It wasn't excitement she had been chasing, it was understanding. The realization unsettled her because it forced her to face what was missing at home. One evening, Ethan suggested they take a walk after dinner, something they hadn't done in months. The air outside was cool, the city lights soft against the dark sky. For a while they walked in comfortable silence, their footsteps falling into an old rhythm. I feel like I'm losing you, Ethan finally said, his voice quieter than she expected. Lena stopped walking. The honesty in his words caught her off guard. She looked at him, seeing not the distracted man consumed by work, but the person who truly feared distance growing between them. You're not losing me, she answered carefully, though the words felt complicated. Then what's happening? He asked. You're here, but not really. She searched for the right response, struggling to explain feelings that seemed larger than language. I think we stopped really talking, she said softly. I didn't even notice when it started. Ethan listened without interrupting, his expression heavy with regret. He admitted that work had become an escape from pressure, something he could control when emotions felt messy. He thought providing stability was enough, never realizing she needed more than security. The conversation continued slowly, fragile but honest. For the first time in a long while, they spoke without rushing to fix everything. Lena felt relief mixed with fear, knowing truth could heal but also expose what had been hidden. That night, after Ethan fell asleep, her phone buzzed again. Ryan's message was simple. Hope you're okay. Just checking in. She stared at it for a long moment. The warmth she once felt was still there, but it no longer felt harmless. She realized that emotional closeness carried consequences even without clear boundaries crossed. Ryan had entered her life during a vulnerable moment, but staying in that space would mean avoiding the real conversations she needed to have at home. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard before she typed a careful reply. Thank you for being kind. I think I need to focus on fixing things here. She hesitated, then pressed send. The message felt both heavy and relieving, like closing a door she had never intended to open so wide. The next morning, Ethan woke early and found Lena sitting by the window with coffee. He sat beside her quietly, their shoulders touching. Neither rushed to speak. The silence felt different now, less empty, more thoughtful. I don't want us to just survive, Lena said after a while. I want us to actually be close again. Ethan nodded slowly. Then we start now, he said. No more waiting for the perfect time. His response wasn't dramatic, but it felt sincere. For the first time in weeks, Lena believed that change might be possible if they both chose it deliberately. Still, rebuilding trust and connection didn't happen in a single conversation. As the days moved forward, small moments carried new meaning. Shared meals without phones, conversations that lasted longer than updates, honest admissions when something felt wrong. Progress was slow, uncertain, but real. Yet Lena knew the story was far from finished. The emotions she had experienced couldn't simply disappear, and the cracks in their relationship would take time to heal. She also understood that choosing someone again was not a single decision, but a series of daily actions. One evening, as she and Ethan sat together watching the city lights flicker through the window, her phone lit up briefly with a final message from Ryan. I hope you find what you're looking for. She read it silently, then locked the screen without replying. There was no anger or regret, only a quiet acknowledgement of a chapter that had revealed something important about herself. Ethan leaned closer, unaware of the message, and rested his hand over hers. Lena looked at him and felt both hope and uncertainty, the two emotions existing side by side. Outside, the city continued moving, endless and restless, while inside their small apartment, two people began the difficult work of learning each other again. And although the future remained unwritten, Lena understood that the real story was no longer about what almost happened, but about what they were brave enough to rebuild next.